Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we have a very special guest. We have the founder and CEO of Joygage, Craig Fowler, who is joining us to discuss Joygage and how it's having positive impacts on families who have loved ones dealing with dementia. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you so much for having me, Lance.
You're welcome, Craig. So, Craig, tell us, what is Joygage?
So Joygage is a subscription service that's available online or via an app, pretty much with anyone that has any connected device. And it's designed specifically for people living with dementia. And it's designed to give them opportunities to engage and be entertained kind of regardless of what stage of dementia that they're at. You know, the story I have, my mother was diagnosed with early onset dementia in her early 60s and lived for around 15 years afterwards. And, you know, my father, I'm an only child. I was living here in the Detroit area in Michigan when my family was still down in Tennessee. And, you know, my father struggled a lot with my mom with really keeping her engaged. And one of the things I found was that while I read every book and we had training and tried to learn as much as we could about dementia, the area that I found that took the most time and probably created some of those problems was just trying to find things that my mother could still enjoy as kind of her mental capabilities changed. And a few years ago, you know, I've been in the startup technology community for many, many years. And a couple of years ago, one of my co-founder and myself started talking about, well, you know, dementia is an area that there's a lot of need, but just not a lot of technology. And most of the technology seems to be focused on, you know, memory care or facilities, but most people living with dementia are actually at home. What if we tried to use technology to solve the problem that my dad had, that I had for so many years with my mom, trying to find ways to, you know, keep her active and engaged? And that's how Joygage was formed.
That's great. I know we encounter a lot of families who they don't know where to turn or what to do when a loved one has dementia. They don't know how to respond to different situations. And most importantly, they don't know how to keep their loved ones engaged on a day-to-day basis. They don't know what to do to help occupy and to stimulate their memory and their brain and, you know, keep things moving. And one of the things when we were researching Joygage that I found really interesting was you kind of take all those important areas of engagement and stimulation and that person's personal memories in life, and you've kind of located and isolated it into one area, you know, where you have a place for their favorite music, their favorite movies and favorite memories and, you know, pictures. And I'm just really fascinated by the program that you guys are offering and how you have it all right there in one convenient place. You know, how do you think something like that would have changed the projection or have helped with your father's situation caring for your mother?
I think it would have had a profound impact. And, you know, I've tried to use my personal experience throughout the time, our journey now for a little over a year, building Joygage. And I've, you know, asked countless other people for their opinions and tried to learn from people who are currently caring for someone living with dementia, as well as people who are living with dementia. So we've gotten a lot of feedback. But Lance, I think if my mom had had something like Joygage, I think it would have made her have just simply more happy moments and engaged moments during the day. And I would have, I think, you know, equally importantly, provided my dad with some more time for respite when, you know, with giving my mother the ability to find some things she would just enjoy on her own versus being, you know, I would say, especially from the time she got to kind of the early to mid-stage dementia on, she was very needy and really demanding of her caregivers for, I would call it engagement and entertainment.
We had, read an article recently that Joygage was featured in where it was talking about, during the pandemic, a lot of these families who had loved ones, all of a sudden now they're isolated to simply their home, and you're not having people come in, you're not having people go out. And Joygage was able to almost act as an extension of the caregiving team because it helped the caregivers with the respite that they needed from caring for a loved one from the pandemic. And did you want to touch on that briefly and just talk about how Joygage has turned into almost a respite tool for the caregiver as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And originally, kind of our vision was that we care for the person living with dementia and the caregiver equally. And often, I think people like my father, who was a wonderful gentleman, who he passed away a year after my mom. He grew up in the 40s and 50s in a small town in Tennessee, and when it came to caregiving, he was going to give everything of himself and never complain and never say that there was something wrong. But you could tell it was just really. He had a really difficult time dealing with things. And so at some point, I realized that he just needed to admit that he was having, problems and issues with, with being there 24 hours a day. And so I think Joygage was kind of born out of that. And I wanted to give maybe one example. Early on, my mother and father were big TV watchers. The stats have shown the average person in the United States who is over the age of 65 watches something like 7 hours of television a day. And I'm not a big TV watcher, and don't think TV is the best thing for people to do. But one of the things early on when we started doing research is we realized, and there have been some studies on this, people who used to watch a lot of TV and movies, once they get dementia, or once dementia progresses, they stop watching and taking part in it as much. And so at first that may sound positive. What we realize is the reason is that people have a lot harder time with their attention span. Their short-term memory starts going, and it turns out the studies have found that people instead just can't stay interested in something once they lose track and lose place in this. So one of our initial problems we ask is, okay, well, what is it? We know that the world is filled with different types of entertainment. There's entertainment of different genres, ages, time. So what type of entertainment and television videos could someone with a different stage of dementia enjoy that doesn't require them to have maybe the same attention span and definitely the same level of short-term memory that they used to? So that's one of the first things that we started looking at, and we learned so much. We really started there, and now we've been continuing with a number of other features and things that with again, the goal that whatever someone is pulling up on Joygage, it's something that they can actually keep up with. It's something that their attention span matches. So, the really cool thing, Lance, is at some point a few years ago, I think you would have needed to spend, lots and lots of time and money on creating specific content for people with dementia. Now we have machine learning and millions and millions of things available online that we can use to constantly experiment and learn, so that we now can we now with Joygage can look at the broader world of entertainment engagement opportunities out there and simply match those to people with dementia versus trying to create something from scratch.
So that was kind of leading right into my next question. I was reading about the machine learning that Joygage implements. Explain that a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind, Craig. Does that mean as my loved one progresses through their stages of dementia, or their abilities decrease, or they have more difficulties with certain aspects of Joygage? I know there's a puzzle feature on Joygage. So if they're working on a certain level of a puzzle and all of a sudden they're starting to have more difficulties, does Joygage recognize that and then make the puzzle a little bit easier the next time they go to utilize it? Or
yes, that's how it's designed right now. Because we're new and we are just learning a lot and we're progressing, we aren't making all those decisions yet, but we will be very soon. So the way the machine learning, it's really an AI algorithm, works is the more we learn about an individual user, the more we learn about what people with a similar characteristics enjoy and can enjoy. And for example, if they used to do a certain puzzle that was a 50-piece puzzle, and you would see them engage for 10 minutes, and suddenly now we see them going to that puzzle and going away after 30 seconds. That's the initial signal that something's wrong and that they'll need to have something that's less, that's easier, maybe a 30-piece puzzle or a 15-piece puzzle. And so that's how the system is designed to work. And to be clear, we track, openly we'll track our users' behavior. We don't share that data. Privacy is a big concern of ours. We are only looking at, the population data to understand how people who are similar to the person that we're serving are reacting with things like puzzles and shows and games over time. And then we use that information to kind of project ahead and to try to make sure that we're offering different things to individuals kind of as they're progressing. Our goal is to not let people get bored or not able to use Joygage. We want to be able to always be able to provide something to them proactively that matches their capability and doesn't make them frustrated. Or that was something I always found with my mom. She would be still engaged in something like she used to like word search puzzles, and at some point she got extremely frustrated with them, and then the next thing you know, she wouldn't do them at all. Even certain activities like going to church or other things, she often had a pattern where she would be involved in something, but then suddenly just get really, really frustrated that she failed at it once, or she felt like she was embarrassed at something she did, and then suddenly she would withdraw. And with Joygage, our thought is, no, we don't want you to withdraw. We want to make sure that you've always got something that's interesting to you to do, but that challenges you, because we as humans always need a challenge. People with dementia always want something that's a little challenging to them, but not to the level that makes them frustrated and angry, right?
Sure. I know we have families that we help, and one particular lady comes to mind. She had dementia in the early stages when we began helping her. And as her dementia has progressed over the years, the family had decided, based on a recommendation from one of our case managers, to get an extra small fridge, because the staff, when they would come in the home, they would bring their food or their lunches, and they would, put their food or lunch in the refrigerator in the main kitchen. And we started noticing that over time, this really caused a lot of angst and anxiety with the lady that we were helping, because she would open the fridge, and instead of seeing the normal things that she would normally eat or drink, she would see, bottles of tea or, soda or, different types of sandwiches or something. And it really caused her a lot of angst and anxiety, where she didn't even want to open the fridge anymore. So we finally figured out, these unfamiliar things that are in her refrigerator are causing her an unnecessary anxiety. So we got a small refrigerator, placed it in a different part of the home. So when the staff go in, they'll place all their beverages or food in that fridge. And now she's back to opening her fridge and, carefree and looking through it and taking out what she wants. But like you're saying, just that small little thing can cause such a huge angst to somebody that's facing or dealing with dementia, that if you don't find a way to correct it, they may not return to it at all. And so that's the interesting thing I found with the computer or the machine learning with Joygage, that, it's going to help correct if it's too difficult or it's causing, an angst, that, lower the level down a little bit and make it a little more enjoyable for the person, if you will. I think that's really important, especially, because dementia is unlike anything else. You can have a good day today, and for no apparent reason, the next day you might be, frustrated or, sad or, dealing with different types of emotions and feelings. And, causing that angst can really, lead to a period of, sadness and, angriness and all kinds of things that, people with dementia, they're trying to communicate, but they don't always necessarily have that ability. And you got to watch for that emotional communication or the physical communication and those cues. So that's interesting. So if you have a family and they're caring for somebody with dementia and they're looking for something to help with the stimulation and activity, and they say, I'm overwhelmed, I can't take on another thing. What would you say if they were looking at using Joygage? Is this a lot of time commitment involved, or?
So I'm really glad you asked that, Lance, because there actually isn't. And there's a really big difference between, I think, Joygage and most other technology solutions for kind of this community or this age group. And that is that we designed this to be a low-cost subscription service that can be signed up for within a minute or two from pretty much any device, that doesn't really require any caregiver, minimal, if any, caregiver training or time. It's just something that you pull up. It's got an easy interface and people can start using it, and the machine and the system goes from there. So really, our goal was to take what in this, there's been a number of solutions for engagement in the past created for the elder care community that typically are hardware based. They're usually pretty expensive. They're often sold into communities at a pretty high price. It's usually like a big sale item. And we've been watching the market trends of the world, saying, hey, wait a second. And for the rest of us, we don't do that anymore. We don't go out and buy expensive stuff. We go and find an app on our phone, or we go and subscribe to Disney Plus or Netflix or something like this. We go and we find a service, we sign up for it. It's monthly for a very small fee. And if we don't like it, we can stop at any time. And we just start, and we open it up, and it usually has a user interface that's super easy, and we just start using it. Like, what if that was the way we designed Joygage? We wanted this to be something that's accessible, anytime, anywhere. And, it can be, without getting too technical, it's something that you can download as an app, or you can just use it as what we call a web app. You can just go to a site and start using the service anywhere. We did realize that and specifically the demographic that we're serving, not everyone has a phone that's completely updated with newest operating system. Not everyone has even a newer phone. Most people have some kind of connected device. So we really designed Joygage to work on almost any connected device. And it also has a button when you're looking at, if you're doing movies, videos, things like that, that will easily cast to any television or device. And we can work with customers on making, if they don't understand that, to make sure they can quickly have a casting device. So long way of saying, we've tried to design this to be super easy to use and to really mimic the kinds of services that we've grown to expect in the last 3 or 4 years, not the just so one of the members of our team sold EMRs into home health and assisted living for many, many years. And it's kind of like the opposite of what she was doing at that time is the setup time and effort for Joygage.
So I read that Joygage is focused on the caregiver as the person living with dementia.
Yes.
Explain what that means and how that focus is come into play with the families that utilize Joygage.
So our philosophy, early on when we formed the company, we created some guiding principles, and these are we're a very mission-driven company. So what our goal is, of course, we are officially a for-profit company, but our real goal is to change people's lives. And one of those first, statements we put down as part of our guiding principles was that the person who is the caregiver is as important, if not more important, than the person living with dementia. Too often, people like my father, and this happens, and I've interviewed so many people, and you deal with this every day. They let their own health issues go, and they don't keep care of themselves. And my father, I think, had some underlying health issues he wasn't dealing with. That looking back, I feel horrible about that. And we want the person living, the caregiver, to be a priority just as much, because their happiness, their mental state, their ability to deal with anxiety, it's going to be critical to their life and to their future. And so, Lance, we want the Joygage to be supportive of them. And just one of the examples when we designed kind of the machine learning and a series of movies and television, we have heard from a number of people that once someone gets to mid-stage dementia, often there's a movie or a video or something that they like. So there's someone will turn the television on and put on one thing and just keep playing it, which isn't the best thing for the person, but it's even worse for the caregivers because they see the same thing over and over again. But someone knows, someone has seen the movie, they realize the movie is familiar. Well, we wanted to have Joygage understand what is it about that video or that movie that someone really enjoyed, and can we find similar videos and things that are more of a variety, so that the caregiver, the spouse of the person living with dementia, can actually be sitting with them and watching something that they enjoy as well, not just the same thing over and over again.
Okay. So one of the things about Joygage that I found really fascinating, and we kind of touched on it early on, was it's customizable to each person. So if we have a loved one that we're helping, and instead of getting, just random photos or random movie clips, you can import your own personal photos or your own personal movies. Is that correct?
Yeah, the personal photos. So what we have is a My Memories feature, and we added this in so that someone can have a very dementia-friendly access to digitized photos. And we have a partner we work with that can take older photographs and digitize them if the family would like to have them digitized. But the My Memories section is set up with really the assumption that someone living with dementia for many, many years will want to have a logical collection of photographs. We found it's important to be in a sequence, because people, even through dementia, think about time and things back into the future. That every time you open one of these photographs, it has a very detailed description of everyone in the photograph. For example, if someone's husband is named Mark, then this should be my husband Mark on every single photograph, with also the ability to add a recording to it. So this was inspired by my experience with my mom and others in memory care facilities, where my mom, I know, had some photographs with her, and some the other residents had photographs. They were fairly meaningless to everyone because they just sat in a desk, and I would notice they would never be moved. And I realized from talking with a number of employees, talking to people who spend a lot of time in memory care, that someone on their own, without someone sitting there explaining to them in detail what was on that photograph, it was never interesting to them. They had to have someone explain. So our goal with the My Memory section is for this to be customizable, so someone can always go back, look through these important people and memories, but have it in a format that's actually understandable for someone with moderate to later stage dementia, who frankly is not going to understand the context or the people in that photograph without prompting.
I think that's smart, because oftentimes if the person's looking through a photo album or looking at the pictures on their walls with the families we help, unless the family lets us know, you can't engage in a conversation or make that connection for that person. They might see it and visually know, but they might not be able to communicate that to the person they're with. That's my husband, or that's my grandson, or whoever it is. So being able to add that feature, I think, is really terrific. Now, with Joygage being focused on the caregiver, helping to be an extension of their support, how is there features with Joygage, or is there plans for it? Because I know it's a new platform that you guys are starting up. Is there a way for the caregiver to go on Joygage and maybe get a caregiver tip of the day or a self-care tip? Is there something like that also on the platform?
So right now, Lance, there's not. It's something that we're seriously considering. One of the reasons why we decided not to put that in our, we really have had a lot of requests for it, we didn't put it in the first iteration, is we're really asking, where things that we could point someone to other directions, where there's not something really available today. And so a lot of what we've been building from a tech standpoint are areas where we don't see there's a lot available. And in that case, over time, we're adding more content. But I think it's a great point. It's a great idea. And, one of the things in many, many discussions in the last year and a half of time building this up, is that it feels like all of us who have a loved one with dementia for the first time are the first people dealing with it. I've heard this over and over and over again. You talk to the doctors, will say, the neurologist, who can't figure out the drugs or the behavior issues. Oh, well, this is a unique situation. That was what they said about my mom. That as soon as I say that, someone else, that's what they said about my brother. That's what they said about my husband. They hear the same thing. So I think things like caregiver tips, even though they're widely available, having them in a context of when you think you're using Joygage and when when you're active in the moment, I think could be really helpful.
Yeah. What is some of the feedback you've received from families or people that have utilized the Joygage services?
So we're still really new. So right now we're looking for lots of trial users. So we have had, but our initial, we've been really operating a lot in the year 2021 with people. And so far people really love it. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. The thing that people, I think, enjoy is that there's something really for them. There's something that's actually in place for kind of solving a specific problem that other people aren't solving. The other, I think, feedback we get is that post-COVID or during COVID, the paradigm was kind of broken that people in our demographic can't use technology. So many people ended up doing video conferences, being on, I've heard multiple quotes. If I didn't think I would ever get a smartphone at age 83, and now I don't know what I would do without it. So I feel that it's, generally people feel, hey, this is a great solution, but it's really at the right time. It's at a time where people now are very open. And the other thing we're hearing, which is really fabulous, and this is what we want from hopefully your listeners, other people, is that we're getting lots of feedback and ideas for different types of content or content providers to link to. Our goal is to link people to content providers, services and things. We aren't trying to control the world. We want to link people to, curate and link people to the best things that are out there. So one example that we realized early on that we're working on now, there are a number of people that grew up on farms. And if you're in mid-stage dementia and you spent your life farming, having a picture of something like a tractor going through a field or a video of that for 30 minutes that may seem for people who grew up in the city to be something completely boring is exactly what someone will find comforting, especially perhaps at night, when you think about sundown time and what to do, what to call people. So we're also getting a lot of feedback about, I'd say cool, innovative types of things to put on or to link to that we never even considered. It's that's the other piece of really cool feedback we're getting.
And that's what I think makes it nice. It's customizable to that specific person and who they are, not who they were, but who they are. They're still the same person. And when you look at a person who has dementia, especially in early, mid, late stages, we like to tell families, they may not know who you are, but you still know who they are.
Yes.
So help them incorporate some of those interests and the hobbies. Maybe somebody enjoyed, watching trains or, going fishing or, hunting, farming, things that made them who they were, take them back to that time. And so if a person was to sign up with Joygage and maybe their mother loved to, bake pies and Christmas cookies every year, and that was her thing for the family, and it was a tradition, could they reach out to Joygage and say, can we get a video incorporated into our package where we can see, pies being made or taken out of the oven? Is that kind of how it works?
Absolutely. And in some cases, there are some of those already there. So we can point someone to those. And then the way the system will work, if you start watching those videos, those will be the ones that come up. So right now, and again, we're still in the earlier stages, we have a lot of different things we link to. And based on the person and a very, very short questionnaire and watching their behavior, the system very quickly pulls things to the top of the list. So if baking pies is your thing, you will see baking pies at the top of the list. Our plans in the next year is that over time, we're actually going to even pan down the number of options, especially for people as they get to mid to later stage dementia, so that they may we're working on, like say, caregiver view versus we call it the user view, where the person, especially for the people at later stages, will only get a few things that they will see. So there will be, smart AI working in the background, but we'll make sure that they have something so simple they only get a few options. But yes, Lance, that's something that we'll direct you to. And then, even very importantly now, if that's something we don't have, like the tractor was something we didn't have, then we want to get that and we want to add it. And the other thing I would say is for any of your listeners is we also, if people are on YouTube, we use YouTube a lot for content. We also love to find people we can partner with that we link to. So if someone has ideas for things that they want, people who use Joygage can we'll link to content, and the people, our view is if we link you to someone and they're an exercise provider in your area, and that's great. I mean, so that's part of our value too, is that we're also looking for people who have things like, some recordings of baking, things like that they want to share. And, by being part of Joygage, you'll also people will learn about those service providers and those people.
That's excellent. And I know when we spoke previously, we were talking about Joygage is really big on promoting tutorials. And so if a user is using Joygage and, given again the user and the caregiver, if they're trying to, kind of fumble through, it's a very user-friendly platform and layout, but they may forgot how they reach this certain area or how to do this certain thing. You're sharing with me the tutorial is always there to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. The default is that every time you go into something, like if you went into the movie section or you go into the game section, a tutorial will come up the first time. It's very quick, easy tutorial. You just quickly go through that will tell you what you're doing, or sorry, how this works. And we did that because we realized that a lot of people with dementia will forget between times. There are options to go in and turn that off for people who are at earlier stages, but we, another one of the guiding principles that you had earlier is we want this to be accessible to everyone. So we want to make sure that Joygage is accessible for someone with more in moderate stages. So we are constantly thinking about how do we add things like simple tutorials? How do we make the UI the user interface seems very simple, just big colorful buttons and things, but we're, with large fonts, but we're trying to make it just as easy as possible. And, frankly, we're learning along the way, right? I mean, there are a few places, there are a few devices like the GrandPad and others over time that have tried to really, go for an older demographic, but we're, going for an older demographic, but also trying to really find ways that individuals living with dementia can use a device. And again, one of the coolest things about Joygage, it can also be one of the more stressful things about the company, is that no one's done some of this. So we're actually, in many ways, it's like a research project, right? We're learning as we go. But the beautiful thing about, modern, machine learning, other technology, is if you can collect the data about how different people use it, you can learn a lot quicker than you could a couple of years ago with the current systems, right?
Absolutely. Now, you said this service is available because, again, some older adults and even younger adults, they don't always upgrade their phones. So the platform is available on any mobile device. Is that, am I getting that correct? No matter what operating system they're on or model phone they're on, but they can also go and use it as a web-based service. And I'm assuming through smart TVs as well.
Yeah. So this can be used anything with a browser. Joygage will come up. So there's what we'll call the native apps that have been created for your Apple Android phones. But so if you went, for example, I might have a Samsung, I can go to the Google Play Store and download Joygage. But what we really want people to do is go into our website, log in very quickly and subscribe that way. And then you can use it. You can either then download, or you can just use this from any browser device. So I think of it as, in today's world, if you go to a pizza place like Domino's, or what, you can either type in just Domino's on your phone, and something that looks almost exactly like the Domino's app will come up, or you will have the Domino's app you can download it specifically, but they look and act almost exactly the same, whether you have what's called the native app or the web app. So we have created the web app, and we've also made it to where it'll work on a desktop computer, an iPad, anything. And again, our goal was to make this, our vision is to make, guiding principles to make this as accessible as possible to anyone and any device. So that's why you can, again, I think, quote, early on, one of the first people that we had who was someone in the care community, but was an older person in their 80s, who was was very tech savvy. When I said download the app, the exact response back was, well, what do you mean an app? And I realized at the time, oh, wait a second. Lots of people have computers, even phones, whatever, but they're not so into downloading and using apps. I'm like, okay, well, let's make this accessible to anyone. Yeah.
Now, so in our show notes, we're going to have a link to Joygage as well as all the contact information. And if people have questions, they can reach out. And
yeah, absolutely. Okay. We have a customer service. We care at joygage.com. There's also will be on our site a phone number to call for people. Right now, there's links. Right now, if anyone wants to try Joygage, it's 2 weeks free, and then it's a very small monthly subscription price that can be you can cancel at any time. So once again, like most services today, it's we designed this to be kind of almost a no-brainer. Go and try it out, see if it's working for you. If it does, wonderful. We want it, the more people using it, the more better service. The more we learn, the more better we can provide to everyone. But it's a extremely low barrier to to start using the service.
And especially the benefit that it offers, the activities, the stimulation, and also, like you were saying, the respite for the caregivers. I think that's key. That's a priceless benefit, to be able to have your loved one fully engaged, stimulated, and helping them with things that they otherwise may not be able to get to do. The music they like, the photos, their memories. And also giving those family caregivers a much deserved and much needed break too during the day.
Yeah, and Lance, another thing that I just want to bring this up. So another area where we can also be of help is even with paid caregivers. I mean, right now, I think I speak all the time with home care agencies, and everyone is struggling. In my own family, we struggle finding people for our businesses. Right, it's just extremely hard right now in home care. It's very, very tough. And one of the things that people like about it, are excited about with Joygage, is it also provides something that someone, if they're in a home and need to do safety checks, need to do a lot of other responsibilities, do other things to help someone, it allows them to have a chance to perhaps get away from an individual for a few minutes while they know that person is safe, engaged, and having a good time. So I think there's a lot of positives for both the paid care community, for the unpaid home caregivers, that can come from being able to use technology to help people more autonomously be able to enjoy things.
Absolutely. I mean, like you and I had spoke about, it's one thing for a caregiver, whether it's a family caregiver or a paid caregiver, to sit and try to work a puzzle with somebody. That person has to go get the puzzle, set the puzzle out, make sure it's on a table, or, go and look for photos if that person wants to watch it, or try to find old family movies or a movie in general that the person likes. But with Joygage, you have it all right there at your fingertips. There's no hunting and searching, it's right there for you. And I think that's such a huge benefit for families and for professional staff all alike. But ultimately, it's the best benefit, or the greatest benefit, to the person with dementia, because they're getting engaged and they're getting stimulated and they're having good memories, and hopefully helps enhance their mood for a positive for a period of time. So I think the work you guys are doing is phenomenal.
That's great. And then Lance, it's great you mentioned this. I kind of think we're at a point where we have to shift paradigms a bit. A lot of people, especially if they haven't been, in the dementia care community or just the home care community for a while, have this idealistic view of supermen and superwomen caregivers that are always spending tons of hands-on time with people with dementia, and that if they're in a care facility, there's this group of extremely trained people with master's degrees all hovering around and spending lots of time. And the reality in the current, environment, work environment, jobs environment and everything else we have, that's just not the case. We just don't have all of that unlimited time for extremely skilled people. It would be wonderful if we did, but the number of people living with dementia and the number of people available, there's a big mismatch. And so I personally think that we have to really be open and change the paradigm to say, hey, automation and technology to help, reduce the amount of labor time we need for, providing things like safety maintenance, care, things like that. There's so much we can do with technology to make sure that people are engaged and happy, but that we don't take so much caregiver time, because there's just not the caregiver hours available right now to do what we want to do.
Yeah, there's a severe shortage across all spectrums: hospital, nursing home, assisted living, home care, and but there's not a shortage of people that need the help. There's a shortage of people who can provide the help. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate it, Craig. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I look forward to seeing where Joygage goes and the families it's going to be helping. And we just appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Well, thank you so much, Lance. And I just really, really appreciate this time, and it's been great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today at All Home Care Matters. And we want to say especially thank you to Craig Fowler for joining us to discuss Joygage. Remember, you can listen to All Home Care Matters on your favorite podcast streaming platforms, or watch the show on our YouTube channel, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Please join us next time on All Home Care Matters, where we will be discussing tips for keeping seniors safe in the extreme heat. And remember, you can visit us at allhomecarematters.com to give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.